What's going on, kids? It is Dr. Remy LeBeau, and I'm coming at you once again from the X-Lair to provide you my very insightful and deep reaction to the latest episode of Legion. This was Legion Season 2, Episode 3, which is, I believe, Chapter 11 of the entire Legion saga. This episode was very sort of self-contained. It was all about this monk, right? The effect of this monk, the fact that there is a monastery where the Shadow King lies, all about kind of elucidating for us the relationship between this monk, a monk order, and the body that the Shadow King covets, his body, the body that's supposed to give him everything that he lost, his wholeness, his ability to be the absolute king of kings, as he said. He's very arrogant, this Shadow King, and I love that because that's an accurate portrayal of the Shadow King, right? That if you're gonna have that much power and you're gonna have that much ability to control, and you're villainous, and they had an interesting moment about talking about villainy in general, then you better be all about arrogance. You better be megalomaniacal, but apparently on a small scale, I don't know. Like he said. Like there was a mention by David of so you don't want to rule the world, and then Al Farouk was like, well, I just want to just live my life but just be powerful and control shit. So we don't know exactly what his plans are. I don't believe that his plans are to simply walk away, but we'll see what happens. Lots of interesting stuff happened this episode. Certainly the beginning was a fun, again, poetic exploration of an idea that was the backbone to the episode. In this case, these sort of poetic expository moments don't happen always at the beginning. They've been happening at different times throughout the show, but nonetheless, they do have quite a bit of reflective meaning on the overall kind of thematic undertones that underlie everything that goes on in an episode, and so this was consistent with that. We had the whole thing about the contagion effect, and it was basically meant to kind of explain the effect that what we assumed to be the Shadow King was having on all these people that were just kind of mindless zombies that chatter their teeth, and they talked about placebo, and then they talked about negativo. I forget what they called it, but it's like the situation where you're given the idea that you can have an adverse reaction to some stimulus, and then when you take the stimulus, you actually create that adverse reaction. So it's sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy of a negative condition, and so you actualize some sort of negative state from just the belief that you are able to do so, and obviously that transcends just an explanation for the chattery folks. The fact that, again, kind of carrying through the idea that David is kind of working against his own interests is 100% involved in this delusion. Now, we had another interesting moment with the dude that can go into people's memories. I forget his name. I need to remember his freaking name. The bald guy. So he had a dream, and this is before the monk woke up or whatever. I don't know where the monk came from, to be honest. I think the monk just showed up. Anyway, this is before that happened, and he had that dream of the egg hatching, and once again, this delusion coming out, this black, slimy creature, and then ultimately it getting inside of his head, implying that he has his own delusion, or he's going to share David's delusion. He's going to help David to help the Shadow King. And so really that also is in line with this whole concept of contagion, where even though the chattering was explained through the contagion effect, that the delusion itself may also be spread via this sort of contagion effect, and that the dude is now going to, again, believe that David needs to help the Shadow King. But really, in the end, is it just the Shadow King controlling them? I mean, the Shadow King is fucking powerful as fuck. So, I wouldn't put it past him. And like I said last week, like he was in David since he was a baby. Like that is not a link that can be easily severed. And there must be some residual psychic energy in there, you know, lingering. And that might be enough for the Shadow King to have that sort of subtle control via this delusion, as opposed to like an explicit control of like taking over David completely. Anyway, aside from that whole thing, like obviously we did have the monk thing. We had that interesting sort of sequence at the beginning where we see that the monks are given the body of Al-Farouk, and he says later that they are incapable of destroying the body. They cannot burn it, they cannot blow it up, they cannot drown it, they cannot do anything to it. But they believe that David can, apparently. Given that they encased him in like this weird egg bubble thing, and then they put him underground within the monastery. And apparently there's a specific type of monk order that is beyond capable of blocking anything from getting into the brains. And clearly having some residual effect from their ability to harness like their own minds and protect them in that way. Like this sort of effect that the monk was having on all those people with the chattering teeth. Which I don't think it was completely explained as to why he would do that or why that would be happening. But maybe in the end, like it really is just the Shadow King doing it, and it's not the monk, and it's all part of the delusion that we're being fed and we are being led to believe is the case. Again, it's hard to know what's real and what's not. It's hard to know like where it's all going to go, because that's the whole point of it. You know, it's the whole point. The whole point is to mislead us, is to create false expectations, is to get our minds to be working in one direction, whereas in reality, things are actually working in this other direction. And then, you know, we're surprised, and that's the whole point. Like we're the audience. Like we're supposed to be taken on an unexpected journey, much like Bilbo Baggins. And I'm all for it, but it is fun to try to figure it out, right? And this is definitely a not an easy one to figure out. Unlike something like Lost, where I think Lost, they had puzzles and they didn't really know how to solve them. I think they know how to solve them here, and they're just intentionally taking us throughout these other sort of windy patterns within the maze that is the show, which I love. I love it a lot. This was not my favorite episode, but there were a lot of really great moments. I really, of course, love the interaction between Al-Farouk and David. I love their interactions because you can tell that the Shadow King believes that David is on his level, but also like he still kind of stands above him. Just maybe in wisdom, in the fact that maybe he believes that like the way in which he thinks that his power sort of elevates him is an elevation in and of itself, and like for David not to believe that is a deficiency in him. Al-Farouk told him that you're so young or whatever, like you'll grow up eventually, essentially, and become as crazy as I am, and think that you are just above it all. That you are a king of kings. They had an interesting moment in that conversation as well, where Al-Farouk basically like, well, first he talked about villainy, right? And like he decomposed like the word, right? He talked about its French roots and how it sort of was in some way meant to imply like a peasant, and therefore this whole thing of like good guy, bad guy is more of a an economical hierarchy sort of thing where you have, you know, those that are privileged up here and those that aren't down here, and the ones that aren't are viewed as an enemy to those that are privileged. And so therefore that creates a dichotomy which leads one to define the one down here as the bad person because it is a threat to the privilege. Whereas in reality, it's just these are two different ways of being. And then he implied that Charles Xavier, who he not mentioned by name, but we all know who he's fucking talking about. Mofos, he's talking about Charles Xavier. That which created Onslaught. Look it up if you don't know what it is. He's talking about Charles Xavier and basically implying that like Charles Xavier was arrogant in his cultural beliefs, that like the hierarchy that the Shadow King had established as a king, and even though he even though he ruled, like the Shadow King believed it to be a just rule, that the Shadow King implied that Charles Xavier was imposing his own sort of cultural ideas of what is right and wrong within a society, what is known as hegemony, like the dominance of one culture over another. That he believes that Charles Xavier was essentially the hegemon, this entity that wants to dominate one culture with one's own culture, and that this struggle between them was actually a metaphor for the big powerful culture bullying the small culture, the smaller culture, into trying to make them think that this hierarchy is legitimate and that one is actually better than the other, which is an interesting thing to imply within the context of these characters in the show. I love that, because that implies that Al-Farouk really truly doesn't believe that he's a bad person. He believes that he's been wronged by David's father, who had the arrogance to try to impose his cultural will on the dynamic that he, Al-Farouk, had established as a ruler that he felt was just. And so therefore he feels justified in what he's doing, and that is the best kind of villain, right? Like one that is absolutely justified. It's not just like mustache twirling and boo-ha-ha, I want to rule the world and $1 billion, all that stuff. Like, it's none of that. It's a very sort of just struggle on his part to try to survive and therefore to maintain a just order. And I love that. I think it's great. It adds a whole other dimension of complexity to the whole situation. The fact that is his perspective. I love it. I love it a lot. I don't agree with him, of course, whatsoever, but it's a great way to sort of contextualize like his position and his whole purpose for being and his whole purpose for doing the things that he does. Anyway, in that conversation, it's clearly established that Al-Farouk wants David to help him find his body so Al-Farouk can go off and just have a normal life. And the reality is that that's not going to happen. But David is buying into it. David has been deluded to believe this. So he's willing to help him. He goes looking for the monk. And then that's when Al-Farouk also tells him that it's the monk that's responsible for this contagion, this effect on people. I don't remember if he implied that that it could be resolved, but David ultimately does figure it out that it can be resolved. Then, we got those great kind of moments going into the mazes of the memory dude and then Melanie, which were fun. There's so many different reasons for the show to find an excuse to be on the astral plane, and that's the nature of the show. The nature of the show is that it takes place mainly on the astral plane. That's what it was in season 1. That's what it is in season 2. Regardless of the storylines that might be different, that might shift, that might change, the nature of the show does not change. And that is like, we're always going to be on that mental scape more often than not. And oftentimes we're not going to know if we're in reality or we're in the astral plane, like at the end of the last episode, which at the end of this episode implied that was in fact part of the astral plane, that place, that rooftop where David was talking to Sid. But then we had this weird kind of moment where like David and the monk were on that rooftop, and then the monk fell off, and then we saw him fall off the building, and it seemed as though the guards for District 3, they noticed it. I don't know, like it's just hard to know sometimes, like what's real and what's not. Which I'm okay with. I'm totally fine with it. Anyway, so we had those interesting kind of explorations of the different mazes. I liked both the memory guys, this perfect idyllic kind of lush like estate maze that was if you pulled out, looked like roses, like this beautiful like silhouette of roses, but was actually his mind, and he was like cutting flowers. But then when David frees him, everything starts to blow up, and it was awesome, man. It was such a great, another sort of interesting, unique representation of reality. Then we go to Melanie, and then she's got a really fucking interesting representation of reality. She is reality, and the reality is this like command line environment, like back in the DOS days before you had GUI graphic user interfaces like like Windows, it was just straight up command line. Like you would type something in, and that's how you would have like role playing type of games or even video games. It would just be like, now you're doing this. These are your options. Go through this door, fall in this hole. And then you say, I'm going to fall in the hole. And then you fall in the hole. And then it says, oh, now you're in the hole. Now you can either jump off the ladder or, it's like, that was what gaming was like back then. Prior to GUI, prior to Atari, and then, of course, Nintendo, and then et cetera, et cetera. And, of course, the stuff at arcades. But I love how that was the reality in Melanie's mind. And, like, they spent a good 10 minutes in there. That's a cheap reality to create. So that was a really good move by the show's creators. I'm always thinking about not just what's going on in the show, but, like, budget. Like, how are they pulling all this off? Oh, okay. They're able to do these really cool effects over here because they can do something really simple over here. And in the end, it's all interesting and unique, so it works. And it all winds up being super effective. So I love that. I love the way they represented her mind. She was released. And then her and the memory dudes, they find the monk in what is the leader of District 3? Is it Fukushima? They find him out. The monk is connected to the Vermilion, I think that's what they're called. And he communicates to them, and he tells them that they need the weapon to destroy the Shadow King. Like essentially, they know that the Shadow King is looking for the body, and also they also know, the monk also knows that David is helping the Shadow King, and he almost revealed it, but he didn't. But David didn't let him. Anyway, and then they go into the astral plane, and then the monk like dies or not. I don't know. And then David figures out that Sid has also been infected by the monk, and then we are in this wintry reality, which is apparently her maze. And then I'm sorry, I'm like shaking around because I gotta go pee. I'm gonna cut this short for today because there really wasn't much that happened, but it was certainly cool. I mean, there was the Lenny stuff too. Lenny very clearly is stuck in his mind, and I like how they're continuing to use her. That's great. She's like the Shadow King's mental pet. Fantastic. Anyway, clearly we're going to get another episode in sort of this vein of like trying to have David resolve these puzzles, these mazes in people's heads so that he can free them from the state that the monk puts them in. And now it's Sid's turn, and like it's all snowy, and like that's where we're going in the next episode. So clearly we're taking some baby steps here, and I'm okay with that. I'm okay with a slow burn because it's clear where the show is going. It's not clear where it's going to end up. And that's exciting. And just the journey is going to be fun no matter what, because that's the nature of the show. The show knows how to really just like play with every element of storytelling, filmmaking, etc., and just really give us an interesting experience. So I'm all in on this, loving it, every moment of it, delicious. Give me more of it. No crazy Easter eggs today. The monks, I think the Shadow King call them the Miko monks or something. The Migo monks. That might be a reference to Mego, the company that used to make these figures in the 70s. It may not be. I don't know. Is it a reference to something in the comics? I don't know. I'm not familiar with it, but maybe you are. If you are, you know where to write it down there on the comment section. Let me know. I'm along for the adventure. You know, I mean, obviously we're going to get to this monastery, and David can probably destroy the body, but will he destroy the body? The monk doesn't believe he will. Do you? Do I? I don't know. I don't think so. Based on what we see, like he wants to help him escape because the Shadow King is promising him that he's going to live like an innocuous life or whatever, which is ridiculous. But that's part of the delusion. David is delusional. Where's all this going to go? I don't know, but I look forward to more. I can't wait to see more. And I'm just really happy with the show. All right, folks, thanks for checking out my little review of, this was Legion. This was Season 2, Episode 3 of, I believe, 10. One of my wonderful followers mentioned that there's 10 episodes. So that's fantastic. We're going to get a good amount more of this stuff. Lots of story to be told. Lots of crazy visual representations of the astral plane. And lots of questions that have yet to be answered. And I'm all in on it. Anyway, if you're enjoying what I'm giving you, click that little button down there, subscribe, keep up with my videos so you can make sure that you know exactly when the next one drops. And if you like the video, click that little like button. If you have a little comment you want to drop, go ahead and do that. Be happy to address whatever thoughts you have on the show. And as always, I want to remind you that if you haven't already, you better put an X in the box because ain't nobody checking me. Take care, folks. Bye-bye.